Introduction. In this module we'll cover the purpose of the course, the required background knowledge you should have to attend this course, the purpose of planning a project, project planning metrics, the planning cycle, levels of planning, and finally monitoring and controlling a project. Purpose of the course. The purpose of this course is to provide you with a method of planning, scheduling and controlling projects using Primavera P6 PPM Professional, which is a Windows-based piece of software. I expect you to have an established enterprise project database or blank database to work in, and I believe I take you up to an intermediate level. Required background knowledge. I expect you to have the ability to use a personal computer and understand the fundamentals of the Windows operating system, experience using application software such as Microsoft Office, and understand how projects are planned, scheduled and controlled, including understanding of the project management processes applicable to your projects. Purpose of planning. The ultimate purpose of planning a project is to build a model that allows you to predict which activities and resources are critical to the timely completion of the project, and then strategies may be implemented to ensure these activities and resources are managed properly, thus ensuring that the project will be delivered both on time and within budget. What does planning aim to do? Well, first of all, part of planning a project is to identify the scope, normally by creating a scope document, and also you need to identify the stakeholders using stakeholder analysis, and from these two documents you can start developing the program. You then need to plan how to deliver the scope and understand the risks, so you need to understand what your project methodology is, how you're going to construct the project, how you're going to break up your contracts and purchase orders, and do a risk analysis. You may need to evaluate different project delivery methods. So for example, you might have an option of cast in situ or precast concrete, and this may require the development of multiple programs. You need to identify the deliverables under a logical breakdown of the project. It's often called a work breakdown structure, or WBS. This is a term used by the PMBOK, or product breakdown structure, or PBS, which is what Prince2 uses. You then need to identify the activities to produce each of the deliverables, so each WBS node will be broken down to deliverables. So if a WBS node is a concrete slab, then the deliverables will be forming, RIO, embedded items, pouring the concrete, curing, stripping and quality checking. You then need to identify and optimize the use of resources. A number of projects are created without resources, but if you're producing a resource schedule, then obviously you need to identify the resources, and then you can use histograms and tables to optimize the use of the resources. You can then evaluate if the target dates can be met. You can identify the risks. During the process of developing the project scope, you might identify risks, and therefore you will have risk mitigation plans which will add additional scope to the project. Then you should be able to provide a baseline, which is a copy of the original project against which you measure progress. Then the program can be used to assist in stakeholder communication and assist management to think ahead and make informed decisions. What does planning a project properly help to avoid or assist in evaluating? Well, first of all, if a project isn't planned properly, then often scope is omitted, and as the project progresses, the costs increase, or there's a reduction in scope or quality to try and keep the project within budget. Also, there will be additional changeover costs. Often when a project is late, then it's handed over incrementally, and that increases the handover cost and the operational cost. You'll also get extension of time from your subcontractors who have been impacted by the delays in the project. There will be loss of your client's revenue because you've handed over the project late. There will be contractual disputes with your customer and the associated resolution costs. There will obviously be resolving contractual disputes with subcontractors and suppliers. There will be a loss of reputation of those involved in the project. And if there's a complete failure, there's a loss of a facility or an asset in the event of the complete project failure. Project planning metrics. You'll find that all planning and scheduling software concentrates on time, scope, cost and resources, and a change to one will obviously change one or more of the other three. You'll find some planning and scheduling software like P6 also includes document control and risk management modules. Planning cycle. Most projects follow a planning cycle where the project is planned and the plan is approved. Normally you set a baseline, and the baseline is considered a copy of the project that progress is measured against, and extension of time and delays are often proved or evaluated against. You should initiate the work in accordance with the plan. If you don't follow your plan, then you'll find it's difficult to claim extension of time and justify changes to productivity if you're not following the original plan. You should then monitor progress and update the schedule on a regular basis, evaluate and report and revise the plan if necessary. Levels of planning. Very few projects are executed with one program. Typically you'll find there will be a bid program or a tender program, then the contract is awarded and there will be a contract program. Some companies have a target program where the contingency is taken out of the program. You have a shorter program that's used to manage your subcontractors, and then often there will be more detailed programs like 2-week look-aheads. And therefore part of planning a project is for you to decide how often and when you're going to add more detail to the program, and obviously when you're going to update it. There are many books on the market that gives guidance on how to do this. AAC international publications have total cost management and a number of recommended practices, some of them listed on the next slide. The PM Bot Guide and also Prince 2 have some advice on how to granular your projects out and add more detail. AAC, which stands for the Association for the Advancement of Cost Engineering, based in the US, has a number of recommended practices, and these are the recommended practices that they have had written that are just associated with planning and scheduling of a project, and it's well worth reading these if you need to have more information on how to execute your project and manage your program. Let me just go through some of the processes you might want to consider using to granulate or add more detail to your program. First of all, the WBS can be increased in the number of nodes. So for example, if you've got a single node for a concrete slab at a level within a building, you might want to break that up into the northwest quadrant, northeast, southwest and southeast quadrants. So you break the original single node into 4. A number of people add sub-projects, allowing you to have multiple P6 projects to represent a single contract or project you're executing. This is quite useful if you've got a number of different programmers working on a project, and therefore you would probably create a P6 project for each programmer that's working on the project. There's a phase development, so phases generally overlap. So for example, you might have a contract program, and then before you start the design, you'll develop the design program in detail. Once you have enough information to go on to procurement, then you can do your procurement program. And once you understand when the equipment is going to be delivered, you can do your installation program. So you'll find that a phase development, phases overlap, and you would develop a program for each phase before you start executing that phase. Also stages. My definition of a stage is they don't overlap and phases do. It's important that you define your terminology as part of your project documentation so people are clear of what you mean, and some people have slightly different definitions for terminology, so it's important that your project team understand what you define as a phase and a stage. But if you use a stage term where it's stage 1 is finished and then stage 2 starts, generally you would do stage 1 program before you start stage 1 and stage 2 before you start stage 2. Work packages is interesting, used a lot in the mining industry. So for example, if you're doing an underground mine, you would have a work package, for example, for the excavation, and the mining company would have an excavation program. Then the program might be handed over to the concreting people who do their work package and put the concreting work in, and then that schedule will be handed on to the mechanical installation. So you tend to build one program on top of the other. It's quite a difficult method to manage projects. I've used it on a few underground mining projects. Rolling wave technique is generally considered like a 2-week look ahead. So a week before you start the next 2 weeks work, you would granulate the master program down into more detail. These are some of the techniques you might want to consider using to add more detail to your program. Monitoring and controlling a project with the program. There are 2 distinct steps when you update a program. Monitoring is where you record what's happened on site and update the program, and controlling is where the programmer sits down with the project manager and decides how we're going to execute the rest of the project and what changes we're going to make to the program. So monitoring program ensures the project provides management with the historical data, trends and deviations from the plan, allowing them to make decisions and control the project. So when you're monitoring a program, you should record the dates and possibly times that work was started and completed, hours and costs required to complete the work, the deliverables or products produced. And monitoring would also confirm the required qualities being met and provide trends that may be used for forecasting the remainder of the project, and record historical data for use in assisting in planning future projects, and obtain data required for preparing extension time claims and dispute resolution. So this is the scheduler updating the program before he or she discusses it with the project manager. Whereas controlling a project is the next level of management, where the project manager analyzes the progress to date and looks at trends and ensures that the project's been executed according to the plan, compares the progress of the original plan. Project manager will review options in case of deviations and forecast problems as early as possible by having a look at what's going on site and what the program is showing needs to happen. And therefore this is where the project manager sits down with the scheduler and decides how we're going to modify the schedule for future work. So in this module we covered the purpose of the course, the required background knowledge you should have to complete this course, the purpose of planning a project, project planning metrics, the planning cycle, levels of planning, and monitoring and controlling a project.